Hello and welcome everyone back to the channel. We are back with another review for you guys today, and we are reviewing Us.
This is the second horror movie directed by Jordan Peele, following his first one, which was Get Out, which we personally really enjoyed. I don't think we ever put a review out on this channel because it was pre-channel. I don't know. But for those of you unaware, this movie is about a family who seems to go on a summer vacation, and then they run into doppelgangers of themselves, and things get spooky and sinister, and that's really all I can tell you without being spoilery. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. However, if you are interested in our spoilery thoughts, we will have a few of those at the end that we will put up a nice big warning before we get into.
Jumping right into our plot and how we felt overall about the story of this movie, without spoiling anything, it's really hard to talk about, guys. I liked it, and I liked it more over time after leaving, I think.
I think a big piece of this movie that makes it different from Get Out for me is I felt like Get Out's themes and messages were much more obvious on a first watch, whereas I felt like in this movie, it felt like the messages and themes seemed a little more one-dimensional on a first watch, and then the more I read people's theories and analysis, I found myself really enjoying what was being told underneath the surface a lot more. But on a first watch, I do think the plot-wise and twist-wise, it's pretty uncomplex is kind of the best way I can describe it, whereas I felt like Get Out was a lot more complex. And I know I'm making a lot of comparisons here, but that seems to be what a lot of other people are doing as well.
I don't know if for me the complexity was the issue, because I did feel like there were parts of this film that felt pretty complex. I almost feel like there was just a lot going on in this film, and I think there's a lot more mystery in this film than in Get Out. I don't feel like they fully explain a lot of the things that happen in this one as much as like in Get Out you pretty much get a full like breakdown of here's exactly how the spooks are happening, and I feel like that's just more of my personal take on that. Like whether that's a good thing or bad thing might depend on the viewer. For me, I didn't love it at first, but then like you said, afterwards and hearing other people's thoughts and feelings about the film, it started to link up a little better for me.
I personally really enjoy this movie still. I think that it is a good horror film, but not in a way that most people would think of a horror film. I've seen a lot of people complaining that this isn't scary, but I don't think all horror needs to be scary, and I do think it's scary until you start to get some explanation, which is pretty typical of a horror movie in my experience. So I find it pretty enjoyable as a horror movie. It's just not... I don't know, I guess it failed a lot of expectations in a lot of different ways, but there are many, many subgenres of horror, so I still personally enjoyed what it was presenting. So we definitely want to talk about the performances in this movie because I think they are absolutely key to just the overall effect of the movie. Lupita Nyong'o is our main character, and I think she was absolutely stunning in this. She obviously has to play two characters as well as the rest of the family, but she's the main character of the whole story, and she's what it all revolves around. And so I think her performance was very good. I think she was very convincing. I never felt like I was watching one actor play two roles. I felt like I was watching two completely different people, and I think she absolutely excelled in that. This movie also tends to switch up tone quite a bit throughout it, in a good way in my opinion. So you go from funny to dramatic to horrifying to heartbreaking to all these things, and I think that she portrayed all of those very genuinely.
Yeah, I felt like she did a great job and in many ways carried this movie. I don't think, while everyone else did a good job, I felt like she was definitely the standout in terms of how much she brought to this one film. And then playing her husband is Winston Duke. I felt like he was okay in this movie. I wasn't super stunned by his performance.
I just think that's more of a writing thing. He's definitely not a main character. Well, he is a main character, but he's not the lead character. He is a supporting character, and I think his performance reflected that. I think that he does carry quite a bit of the humor in this movie, and I did really enjoy his humorous side. The only thing I've seen him in previous to this was Black Panther, which he only has like, what, one or two funny moments in, and he's just not on screen very much. In this, you got to see a lot more of his maybe not range, but just a lot more screen time. You got to know him better as an actor and whatnot. And I think it was good for what it was written as. And to round out the rest of our family, we have Shahadi Wright Joseph and Evan Alex. I've never seen them in anything before. I don't know if this was their first roles, but I think that they were absolutely incredible as the kids. Obviously, they aren't meant to carry the movie, Mom is, but I think that they played their roles very well. This whole family, all four actors really gelled really well together as a family unit, I felt like, and they were all very individualized, which of course is a ode to the writing as well. But these kids were just really compelling on screen, and they weren't like the obnoxious kids in horror movies trope.
That's true. I feel like especially Shahadi did a great job. I think she was my favorite character of the family throughout the film, and I can't say a bad thing about either of them. I think I like both of them a little more than Winston Duke's performance. Like, I felt like they had a lot of charisma, and they were overall just a lot of fun in this film.
I also think their characters went through a little bit more development than Winston Duke's character.
So overall, I think we both really liked the film. I don't think it was completely what we expected going in, but at the same time, especially for a Jordan Peele movie at this point, I think it's clear that you just shouldn't have expectations going into it. But that is the end of our spoiler-free review, guys. We're about to jump into some spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film yet, I highly recommend you leave. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it, though, and click subscribe so you can stay tuned for more content from us, and go watch this movie.
So I want to start off talking about the main theme of this whole movie, which is the fact that doppelgangers are a thing. So I'm going to call back a little bit to our Stephen King reviews that we've been doing recently with Pet Sematary, if you have or have not watched those. That story is a resurrection story. I find it very typical in the beats that it flows with due to resurrection and things going badly. Doppelgangers always have a switch. So I found that the main twist in this movie was not very surprising. I still really enjoyed how it played out. I really liked how it was revealed, but it wasn't something like Get Out where you're like, wow, I did not expect any of that. This one, I was waiting for it the whole movie. I was waiting for some switch. I didn't quite call exactly how the switch happened or who it happened with or whatever, but I assumed it would be a piece.
Yeah, especially since like the central arc of the characters in this film are like their shadows. The alternates are coming to try to replace them, to take over, to get rid of them and take their place, and it's their time in the sun. So considering their whole goal was to like almost switch places with them, it wasn't especially surprising when they revealed that happened. I actually found that the twist that it was happening nationwide to be a bigger twist just based off the marketing and such.
I actually have more theories to build on that, because I don't think her effect was nationwide. I think that they were probably experimenting nationwide and creating doppelgangers nationwide, but I don't think them being trained to do what they were doing with the Hands Across America thing would be nationwide. Otherwise, she would have to be the one who has to go to all of these different little subterranean little bunker things to teach them this and to train them and do what she was doing there. So I don't think that's feasible for it being worldwide.
I mean, I guess that's fair, but I just felt like even at the end you got to pan out to them like driving away.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it
like,
makes sense. I don't think that big long line you see at the end makes sense.
You think it's a plot hole?
Or it's something that's not fully explained, because I do think there are a lot of things. I walked out of this movie being like, plot hole, plot hole, plot hole, plot hole, and then I went and read up on things. I was like, not plot hole, not plot hole, not plot hole. Okay.
I thought part of the idea was that they had like underground tunnels running across all of America, which is why at the beginning of the movie you have that little weird text box that you have no idea what it means when they're like, there are tunnels all through America that are completely abandoned.
So what's the theory there? That she traveled through all of these tunnels for 20 years?
Or the word spread through the tunnels.
They don't speak. They don't communicate with each other verbally. Like, how would they express that or teach each other that?
They communicate with each other. They just don't
But
use
do they?
words.
The only thing we showed them communicating with each other pre her transforming them was them copying what the people upstairs were doing. So it's them imitating their doppelgangers, their originals, not...
But in those free moments, what if, they start passing out red jumpsuits, and then so someone brings a red jumpsuit and points at it, and then they'll go, oh, red jumpsuit.
But I'm saying that you wouldn't they didn't show that on screen in that level of organization and communication. So I don't think it's feasible that her mission would have spread as far wide as nationwide.
I mean, I think that's fair, but I don't think we have enough evidence to discount it either.
No.
Because she's had, since a child, so she's had, 20 years to travel around and do all this
I'm not saying
shenanigans.
it's not possible. I just don't think it's feasible.
Because
synonyms. You know what I mean?
So one thing that I didn't quite catch at first about this movie that I ended up liking more is a lot of the themes that come in this film, and they're definitely not as explicit as Get Out. I feel like Get Out's pretty straightforward with its racial commentary, and this one's definitely a lot more subtle, and I think a lot of people probably left this movie not catching any of it. So in that respect, I feel like it wasn't as successful at that, but Brittany actually found a video from another channel who I guess is a podcast.
It's a podcast that also has like a video cast of it on YouTube, which is Dead Meat. And I found this because Amy shared it. I will link Amy and this podcast down below.
And they basically spent like an hour and a half doing like a deep dive of all the ideas and themes that could have possibly been in this film. And after listening to that whole thing, I actually ended up liking this movie more the more I thought about it. Because I was like, okay, it's very clear that with the amount that they pulled from it and all that analysis that happened, that there are a lot of intentional choices that just because they went over my head doesn't mean that they weren't there and weren't significant. And I thought they were pretty cool.
I think something else that's important to know as I'm learning more about Jordan Peele and his history of comedy and horror and a lot of that stuff, I've been doing a lot of research on that in the last couple days just because I've been very interested in it. And Jordan Peele loves The Shining. He loves Kubrick's The Shining so much. He makes multiple references in his sketches to it and things like that. And The Shining is one of those movies that people to this day are still debating its themes and messages and what it truly meant. So I think it's completely on brand for him to make a movie like this that doesn't fully explain everything and leaves things open-ended and leaves things up to the audience. I think that makes sense. So I think it was an intentional choice. Just one that a lot of people might not be on board with.
I would agree. I think for me, the theme that I walked out of that movie feeling and understanding that I really liked was actually kind of the argument of nature versus nurture, of how because they switched as a child, they, the person who ended up good wasn't the person who started out in a good situation versus the one who turned out evil, start out in a good situation.
Yes, I think that a big theme of this is not only that, but also what is evil, what constitutes evil, because both of these characters, the main characters, you have Lupita's, I forget her original's character, and then you have Red, and both of them view the other as evil for legitimate reasons. And so I think that's a fascinating look at your circumstances and your perspectives and things like that warps what you truly define as evil.
Yeah, I feel like it does paint a very cool story, especially of Red, this person who got the bad end of the stick, got trapped down there by her doppelganger, had to grow up in what is quite literally like a hell version where you have to copy people, you like have to eat raw meat all the time. That's the only food down there. It's terrible. And after all these years, she finally gets her plan together and goes out for revenge. Like, I feel like you could have done a whole movie from her perspective where you could have rooted for her that entire revenge film and see what turned out. It's easy to sympathize with both sides.
So a couple of references or not themes, but just like intentional things done within the film that I didn't catch and I was actually very confused by during the movie, and I was like, this is stupid, and then I read up on it. I was like, that's real smart. So the main thing was the whole red jumpsuit, glove, scissor thing. So the scissors I got that pretty quickly because it's, I didn't get it, I guess, necessarily quickly. I got the cutting the tether part, but I also like that somebody else pointed out that they use scissors because it's two blades working as one to do something. Doppelgangers, two sides of equal things. I think that's genius.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, viewers, but I don't think they open the scissors
I'd
throughout
have to
the
rewatch
movie.
it because Steven asked me this at the end of the movie. I was like, didn't they? But I don't know if they did.
But every time I saw someone stab someone, it was always just holding it like a knife.
So is
And
that symbolic? Probably.
yeah, like the two never coming apart.
Yeah, they work together, but as one, not opening. I don't know. I don't know. But the other thing was the jumpsuit and the glove, and I was like, first of all, where would she get all this bullshit? Second of all, why? Like, where did she come up with this uniform? And it's fucking Michael Jackson. To be fair, I'm not the biggest Michael Jackson, like, fan. Like, I like his music and everything, but I don't, like, deep dive into his shit. And so she picks a Thriller shirt at the carnival before she gets swapped, and the Thriller music video has him in a reddish, like, leather jumpsuit situation, and he always wears one glove. Makes total sense that her child brain would be, like, converting that imagery into something. So I think that's really clever now that I know what it represents. But I walked out of the movie and I literally on the way home, I was like, I don't get it, it's dumb.
I felt really dumb after hearing someone else say that, because I was like,
Same. As soon as somebody was like, Michael Jackson Thriller, I was like, I know that music video and I'm aware that those are those things. And why did I not make the connection sooner that the one glove... I spent this entire movie having these tendrils come out of my brain being like, this is a thing, but I'm watching a movie, so I'm not fully following that brain path. And then by the time the movie's over, I've gone down 50 million paths and I can't like backtrack all of them. And then somebody mentions it and I'm like, oh, that's where my brain was going. I just didn't follow it all the way through. So it was a very interesting experience.
I think a theme that I've now heard talked about quite a bit about this film that I honestly didn't get at all while watching it, but it makes a lot of sense afterwards. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Is this whole idea of there being a whole like underground, invisible like class of people who the government has decided to quite literally put down underground in a terrible situation, trying to rise up and take their place on the same level as all the normal humans. And I thought that was a pretty fascinating theme that can apply to a lot of different groups, especially in America.
It definitely has some heavy themes on classism and what that means and how America treats different classes, especially lower classes, or classes of people that it quite literally created and put it into a box and then just left to suck and not be able to care for themselves correctly. I think it's a big commentary on homelessness. I think it's a big commentary on immigration, which is something I want to talk about, because the Dead Meat podcast that we talked about earlier, they kind of went off on this thread a little bit, but they didn't quite go all the way that I was thinking of it. I think this also comments on the fact of, you know, people who immigrate to America and then have a child on American soil and it's a naturalized birth and they are a citizen. I think that this has very similar connotations to that, and I think it's a very interesting commentary on that, as well as, you know, the homelessness, classism, and other immigration issues as well.
And I think one of the big ways that they show, you know, that focus on that idea of classes and people who belong as Americans is because the one of the first lines that comes out of their mouth when the family first appears, they all sit down and Lupita is like, "We are Americans," is like one of her lead lines, which is very weird. And when watching
it was after when they finally got to the like, "What are you?" and that's like what they are. We're Americans. That's what she boils down to.
But I thought that was so fascinating because it was like, I was confused as hell when she said that in the movie, like, "We are Americans," and I was like,
"What does that mean?"
What?
But it has so many tendrils of connotation that could go to it, and a lot of people could, you know, apply their own theories to it.
Yeah, and so the more I think about this film, the more I end up almost like, you know, you watch this film, you really want the original family to succeed. And I do think the twist at the end where you found out that they were actually originally switched makes you feel even more sympathetic towards the doppelganger family who got out, because their struggle and their situation and what they're trying to achieve, you know, they say it from the very beginning, we're Americans, and it's our time in the sun. Now, their method might have not necessarily been the best one, trying to murder all the other people, but it is interesting to, like, sympathize with their struggle and to almost, like, root for them more. Like, the more I think about this movie, the more I'm like, man, they weren't really, like, a bad guy. They were the antagonist of our core family, obviously, but it wouldn't have been such a terrible thing for them to completely win either.
Of course, these are all just theories. I don't think Jordan Peele has confirmed. I don't know. I've been we kind of went down a little bit of rabbit holes looking into things, but we try not to do that too much before doing our own reviews, but we really wanted to have a little bit more knowledge to bring to you guys in this review, so we did a little bit, but we try not to do too much. But I think this could also be one of those classic situations where you're in English class and the teacher's arguing why the curtains were blue and all the symbolism it has, and then the author's like, I just wanted blue curtains. There could be a lot of that going on in this as well, but I think, from what I've seen of Jordan in his interviews, I think he enjoys the fan theories. I think he enjoys leaving those unexplained things so people could add 5 million different explanations to it, even if that's not what his original intention was.
I would be astonished if he ever says anything to confirm one way or the other, because it definitely...
I mean, he did a little bit with Get Out. I was watching a video earlier where he literally went through and confirmed or denied theories that people had for Get Out.
That's true, but I feel like I think this film is a clear direction towards moving away from the explicit and more into the there's a lot of different ways I feel like this film can go, and I feel like it starts to take some of that away if he were to then say, no, it is about this. Yeah. Versus saying, I don't know, maybe it could be about all of the things, or none of them. Maybe that was... and it seems very Jordan Peele to me. So I think for me, this film has grown over time since after watching it. I like it more. When I first walked out of the theater, I was like, it was pretty good. And now I'm like, okay, no, I'm solidly in the camp of, this is a good film and worth watching, and I quite enjoyed it.
I think I would agree. It's definitely one that I want to watch more. We've only seen it once at this point. I would definitely love to do a rewatch. I don't think a rewatch is required to understand it, but I think it's interesting to just dig into more of those things you might not have caught the first time around. There's also a ton of other horror movie references in this that I was not aware of, even if I've seen the movies. I was like, oh, I would have never picked up on that. I'm so glad somebody pointed that out, and then I will enjoy it when it comes to a rewatch. So that's fun, as Jordan Peele is such a classic horror nerd. But like this video, if you liked our review, I want to say leave your theories down below, but I don't want to spoil people. I'll put a thing in the description that says avoid the comment section if you want to be free of spoilers. But leave your theories down below. Let us know if any of the theories that you heard us discuss were ones you hadn't heard of before, and if you have anything to add to them. I want to talk about all the things. If you didn't like this movie and you disagree with us, that's fine. You can express that. Just please be respectful about it. And subscribe if you are interested in more videos from us. We have a lot of different content coming your way. And we'll see you in our next video.